Today we will talk about percent basics in terms of percents, decimals, and fractions altogether. Let's start with the percent notation. To go from a percent to decimal, let's review what we used to do. Percent to decimal. What we do is we simply divide. So I'm going to do those in blue. 50% is 50 divided by 100, which happens to be 0.5. Let's do 150%. 150 divided by 100, which happens to be 1.5. And 0.2% means 0.2 divided by 100, which happens to be 0.002. Now, percent to decimal is just simply divide. So let's go and let's do percent to fraction. To go from percent to fraction, you need to remove the percent and then write over 100 and then simplify. So let's do those. 50% is 50 over 100, and when you go and simplify, you get 1/2. 150% is 150 over 100. Simplify 3 to 3/2. 0.2% is a little bit tricky. 0.2 over 100. Now what you need to do, you need to remove the decimals. So multiply the top by 10 so that you remove the decimals. You'll end up with 2 over 1,000. Now what you do, you simplify. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1,000 divided by 2 is 500. So the answer is 1 over 500. So, to go from decimal to fraction, on the other hand, let's try to do from decimal to fraction. Remember, 0.5 is 1/2. How do you go from 0.5 to 1/2? So you simply, to go from decimal to fraction, you read, let's read it. 0.5 is 5/10, and then write 5/10 is 5/10. Okay? Then you simplify. So to write 5/10 and simplify, 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5, 2. So we're going to actually do a little more of that, starting with the fraction or decimal in the subsequent section. So let's go to that one. Let's say I have a decimal and then I want to go to percent. Let's do that with in blue. To go from decimal to percent, what do? You just simply take your decimal, multiply by 100, and then put the percent sign. So let's do that. Take the decimal, multiply by 100, you get 30, and then you put the percent sign. 1.7, multiply by 100, 170, put the percent sign. How about 0.0004, multiply by 100? When you do that, you have to move it 2 decimal places, so you'll end up with 0.04%. So to go from decimal to percent, you simply multiply the number by 100 and put the percent sign. What do we do when we want to go from decimal to fraction? And that is, I was trying to talk to you about. 0.3, what you do is you simply read it. When you read it, you will get 3/10. And then simply write what that is. 3/10 means 3 over 10. and 0.3 is simply 3/10. Let's look at it. 1.7. Let's read it. 1.7 is simply 1 and 7/10. 1 and 7/10, which happens to be 10 times 1, 10 plus 7, 17/10. So all you have to do to go from decimal to fraction, you just read it and you write it. So let's try 0.0004. What is that? That is 4 10,000s. Okay, so this is the digit of tenth, 100,000, 10,000. So it's 4 10,000. So what you need to do, you now need to simplify. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 10,000 divided by 4 is 2,500. So it's 1 over 2,500. So from decimal to fraction, you read it, you write it, and you simplify it. Let's see what happens when I want to go from fraction back to percent and decimals. All right, so let's do one example. When I want to go from fraction to percent, what you need to do is you need to go either make the denominator 100 by multiplying numerator and denominator by that, or you go fraction to decimal, decimal to first percent. So let's do the fraction to decimal because of that. Fraction to decimal. How do you go from fraction to decimal? If you remember, you're going to simply divide. So when you go from fraction to decimal, 1 divided by 3 is 0.333 repeating. Okay? When you want to go from 5/3, all you have to do is just divide 5 by 3. And remember how you used to do that. And you know that you're going to have 1.6 repeating. So fraction to decimal is simply divide. 2 and 1/2. So what do I do with the mixed numbers? When you have 2 and 1/2, just divide the fraction part. 1 divided by 2 is 0.5, and you have 2. 2 and 0.5 is simply 2.5. So to go from a mixed number into decimal, you write the whole number part, and the fraction part. 1/2 is 0.5. So you add these two is 2.5. Another way of dealing with that is go from mixed number into an improper fraction, which is 5/2, and then divide. 5/2 is simply 2.5. Now if you want to go from, let me scroll down a little bit. If you want to go fraction to percent, and remember we go from fraction to decimal to percent. So we already went to decimal, and how do you go from decimal to percent? So we go fraction to decimal to percent, and you go 1/3, divide is 0.3, and to go from decimal to percent you multiply by 100, and I put the percent sign. So you have 33.3, and I put the percent sign. You multiply by 100, which is 1.67, and now put the percent sign. For this one, 2.5, multiply by 100, you're going to have 250, and put the percent sign. So you can do it in a couple of different ways, but we pretty much covered the whole ground right now.